So good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's online AutoCAD user group with today's presenter, Mr. John Hackney. Today's focus is going to be on maintaining AutoCAD CAD standards and tools. So, Mr. Hackney, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. The main focus of my broadcast today, excuse me, is it's kind of a defensive tool. It's kind of a way of maintaining your drawings after the fact, but it also can be used during the process. The best defense for a good set of drawings is, of course, a template. And if I open up my template, I have already configured my master template. Now, in your template, you want to have your layers set up, of course, your annotation, your text, dimensions, and etc. set up. This is your first line of defense in getting good drawings, and distribute this template to everybody to use. Now, the CAD standard tools will help you maintain these template settings, and that's what our focus is on today. So let's set up my template so that it uses CAD standards. So I'm in my template drawing, as you can see. I go over to the Manage tab, and I find the CAD Standards panel. I touch the Configure button. Now, I have no standards hooked to this template yet, which I'm going to do right now. So I hit the plus. This has been pre-made. Now, to make the DWS file, which is a drawing standards file, you simply take your template and save it as a DWS file. That will take all your template settings into the DWS standard. So that's the first step. Open up your template and save it as a DWS file. I've already done that. You can name it anything you want. The next step is to open up your template again, or it's still open. Go to Configure and add the DWS file as the standards for your template. So it can be checking in the background as people work, or after the fact, whichever you choose. So I'm going to go ahead and open that, and now I have a DWS file assigned to this template. Now I can put more than one if I want, and they are picked up in the order they're processed. You can move them up and down to rearrange them to what you want as far as their priority. I'm going to remove that second one for right now, just have the first one. So at this point, I want to go and hit Settings. There's some settings in here I'm going to demonstrate. The first one's pretty obvious. It disables everything I'm doing. You're not going to be using that one unless it's annoying or something you need to do. But you can come back to it and turn it on any time. The second one is not the best one, and I'm going to show you why in just a second. And I'm going to take off the automatic for this particular and come back and explain that later. So I'm going to leave it on this second one and say OK. I'm going to go ahead and say OK and save my template. Now I'm going to close my template. Now, one of the best things to do is to set up your template on the Q New button. So when I touch it, I'll automatically have my template. Going back and checking, I can show you now that I have my CAD standards attached to my template. So I'm ready to go. So everybody, when they start their template, they have these CAD standards in the background, and the settings are as I left it. The settings, by the way, are independent of the template file itself. They are independent. So let's just show you what we mean by standards. The second option is kind of annoying, and I think you'll probably not use it. I'll just show you by quickly going up to my layers and change the color of a layer. And it immediately pops up and gives you a warning and says, okay, you're violating standards. Do I want to use the standard, or do I want to keep the non-standard object? Well, obviously, if you're trying to enforce your layers, you would keep the standard. And it comes up and says, okay, object should be object. And notice I had changed it to green, and it should be white by the standards. So all I have to do is say fix, and it's been done. So that pop-up box can get annoying. Let's say I do a CAD standard, a dimensional standard. Let's say I go to my two-place, and somebody is going to change the decimal places to 4 in the 2, which is not correct. Say OK, close, and it pops up again. And of course, I want to use the standard, and it is two-place annotated. See, I've set it to 4, you'll put it back to 2. So I can fix it. Now let me go to the settings here a second. You can get to the settings from this check standard dialog too, and change it to automatic just real quick, and show you how this works. This will automatically change a standard that is by the same name. By that I mean, if it says, I'll show you in a second. Let me just go ahead and say OK here and close that. Let's say I go back to that same dimensional change. If the name is exactly the same, it will automatically change it. So let me do the same thing. If I modify that to 4 places, which should be 2, say OK and close, you see it comes up the same dialog, but when I touch that, it automatically fixed it because it's the same name. So that may be a setting you want to leave on all the time, or it may not. Now let me show you the next setting, which is much more appealing, and I think the one you'll probably run. I'm going to go back to Configure and pick on my settings. I'm going to take off the automatic just for right now and pick on the last one. This will put the CAD, yes.
Just one second. For those of you who are having a problem seeing John's screen, if you were to look at your screen right now, there are 2 arrows, one going one way and one going down, sort of up and down. If you click on that, it will expand the screen and it will make it larger for you. I believe that's on your right, top right. There's an arrow going up and down. Click that and it'll expand your screen. Sorry, John, go ahead.
Okay, now this setting for notification is going to put the standards into the status bar, which will be right down here in this lower right-hand corner. I'll say OK there, and I'll say OK to this, and you'll see it pops up a new icon. If I right-click on that, I have all the options, and this makes it very easy to get to also. For example, I can configure standards from here, the same dialog. I could change my settings. I can also do my checks. You can also disable it, which you don't want to do. Let's go through the same process with the status icon. Much more appealing, you'll see. If I go to my layers and just change, again, a color, which is not standard, it pops up and shows a standards violation. If I pick on the check standards, it does the same thing it did before. I can say fix it and close. Now, that little bubble that comes up, I might tell you it's easier so it can go away, is to change your trace settings. The trace settings environmental variable will allow you to set the time of that blister or that notification, which can be very, very helpful. I have it set for 10 seconds. I normally run it at 5, but for this demo I'm doing 10. Let's go through and make another change. Let's just change out. I tell you what, instead of dimensions, let's change text this time. I'm going to change my standard font from Tahoma to Times New Roman. When I close it, up comes the standard notification again. And of course, I can then pick and it will automatically fix it, or I can fix it. If I change my settings to automatic, the same thing appears, does like before. If I change something like my decimal places on 2 place, it comes up. When I touch it this time, it fixes it automatically. I'm going to change that setting back from automatic again. So now that we've gone through the settings, I don't think I've missed anything. Let's take a look real quick. There's one at the bottom. I'll get to that in a few minutes. This is where the standards will come from for replacements. Let me open up a drawing. In this drawing, I've got some violations. You'll see I've got, just keep your eye on that dimension right there. That's supposed to be, well, I'll click on it, and in my quick properties, I see it's supposed to be a two-place annotative dimension, but it's actually showing 3. So there was an error on somebody's part. This drawing needs to be corrected. Down here, the text. It's by layer in text, but if you'll come up here and look, my standards say the text is not supposed to be yellow, it's supposed to be green. So I run my standards, check. Right-click and say check standards, and you'll see it pops up and says that the two-place annotated is supposed to be this one, and I can see the differences down here. It's showing 3 places, it should have been 2 out of the standards file. So I'll go ahead and fix it. Same thing with the text. It was supposed to be green, excuse me, I thought it was supposed to be green. It's supposed to be white by the standards. It's yellow, which is against standards. So I go ahead and say fix, and you'll see both of them changed perfectly. Let me close the drawing and not save it, and reopen it real quick to do it automatically. I'm going to turn my settings to automatic, so I don't have to fuss with it much. They are the same name, so it'll find them automatically. So I go ahead and run my standard check, and you'll see they're both been fixed automatically because they're the same name. The layer name was the same, and the dimensional style was not been changed, just the properties of it. Let me take automatic back off. I have to take that off because it's not very effective. Let me show you something you got to be aware of, and this is a good thing. If I pick on that dimension and come over to my quick properties or my properties and change the decimals here to 4 places, that will not be picked up by the standards because I'm overriding a property of an individual entity, not by the style manager. The 2 places still 2 places. So it will not check it. So let me just go through and prove that. I'll right-click on this and say check standards. See, it found nothing. That's a good thing because you will be changing some decimal places on the fly. If you want to correct this one, it could easily be done with an update command from the appropriate style if you want to do it. So that's a good thing. Let's move into a more complex drawing. Let me go into my number 2 production drawing. I've labeled quite a few entities here as having errors. This is a pretty messed up drawing that somebody has sent in, and the CAD manager, unfortunately for him, has to correct it. But CAD standards makes it pretty easy. Notice I've got them labeled. For example, the text style was changed to a wrong font. The hidden lines were changed to a wrong layer. The outside entities were put on the wrong color. Dimensional styles are different. This is supposed to be a 1-place decimal, and they're 3. Now, this was a manual change from the entity. That will not be picked up with standards. But the layer, this command here, layer translator, will pick up later. Also, this is a block. Block will be translated, but it's internal until you run the layer translator. We'll get to that in just a minute. So let's keep an eye on these things real slowly as we go through them. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up and check my standards. First of all, I want to be sure that my standards has got the file related. It does. By the way, you can have different standards assigned per drawing if you want. It doesn't have to be the same ones in your template. Go ahead and check standards. Let's go through these slowly. So somebody had a general dimensions and it's supposed to be one place annotated. And here's the differences right here. So I'll go ahead and fix it. It also says that I have an object layer that was changed in color. There's the yellow. It should have been white. So I fix it, watch it change, and the screen updates. Now the dimensions haven't changed yet, but they will. Just keep an eye on them. They're a little slow getting started. There they go. They sometimes take a little bit because they have other properties that control them. Somebody put in a new layer called layout plan. I don't want that. It should be object. I'm going to go ahead and just fix it. They put in one called piping. Here it is over here, this new layer called piping. And it's really supposed to have been, it's called third pour piping. It should be on the piping layer. It has different properties. I'll go ahead and fix that. As you can see, it updates. The next one was a text change. That text right there is supposed to be AS standard annotated. I fix that, it corrects the font, and gives me all the changes. Now that was a manual. If you do automatic, we picked up 2 of those instead of you doing it manual on all of them. But the rest of them would have to be done manually. So now let's look at this block. Well, the block didn't update. It's on the wrong layer and everything. By the way, it's a nested block. If I look at the block, you'll see it's nested. The 2 circles at the end are a separate block. We're going to skip ahead real quick here and go to the layer translator and tell it to load the same standards file. We'll come back to this later, don't worry about it. But I just want to show you how this will update. One of the settings, which is really great, it can translate objects in blocks. And it'll even do nested blocks. I haven't done past 2, but I'm sure it'll go on. So if I hit load that and then map it and translate, I'll come back to this. Notice it fixed all that too, to the standard font and the layers, even though it's still a block. Everything's been changed correctly. So what you want to do is run the standard checker first and then the layer translator in that order if you're going to do the complete drawing. Okay? So now let's do this one again automatically just to show you how quick it is. I'm going to go ahead and close it, don't save it, and reopen it. I'm going to turn on my settings to be automatic. It will pick up 2 automatically and go ahead and change my settings or check my standards. Again, that's not the same name, so I have to pick it and fix it. By the way, if you want to override it, you can with ignore this problem. I'm going to ignore one in a second. I'll fix that one. The hidden line should be hidden. Now the layout plan goes to object. The third for piping, I'm going to leave that one and ignore it. And it puts my name on it. It can come back, it'll come back later, you can fix it if you want to. Hit next to move on and skip that one. Again, my text, and you'll see it has 7 are fixed, 2 are automatic because they were the same name, 4 manual, and 1 was skipped. Now, the checking can be done with multiple standards files. Let me open up another drawing. This one has a layer in it that I want to preserve called HVAC, and also, well, actually HVAC is the main one. So I'm going to go to my configuration. I'm going to add another standards file because things have changed. I'm going to add another one, and it's called alternate. This one contains a layer called HVAC. So now when I go through this, let me sure my settings are not automatic, so you'll see this. Automatic doesn't show you a thing. Check my standards, going through these again. I know you get tired of this, but bear with me. Object goes to object, hidden lines to hidden. Now I'm up to the HVAC. And you notice it's now using the alternate DWS file. So you can assign more than one and pick up the standards for two different ones in the priority that you want them. I'll go ahead and fix it. And again, the text. So we're fixed, all manual. So don't forget, you can assign more than one alternate, or you can have more than one standards file hooked to it. Now in the settings, we talked about this. You can tell it which one it takes priority. If I picked up this one, it would have picked up that as being the priority setting. But I really wanted to pick up this one as being priority. But you notice it'll skip to this, the other one automatically if it needs to. The big thing you need to remember is getting your CAD standard set up. And the easiest way to get your CAD standards file set up is to save your template and then add to it as you need to. As you go along, you can build on that by adding new layers as you need them for different projects, to alternate checking files or standards files. It's up to you. Remember, there are different settings as far as how it informs you. And I believe the last one's the best. Now there's another tool furnished with AutoCAD when you install it. It does not change the drawings on the screen, but it gives you a printout of what's wrong with your standards. If I go down to my Start menu and go to All Programs, and I'll find on Autodesk, under my version, and I'm using 16, Batch Standard Checker. Now this will not change anything in the drawing, it's just a reporter. So I pick on that. Let's go over this. First thing, we want to add some drawings. Let me add these drawings. I'll skip that last one. This one right here, I'll skip that one. I'll open those drawings. You can, of course, see information of each one over here. The next thing we want to do is the standards. I can use the standards file associated with each file, or I can check it using a standards file I assign, or more than one that I assign. I'm going to do two of them. So you can use either method, the ones that are assigned to the drawing, or you can assign your own. I forgot to show you plugins. This is under Configure as well. There are 4 plugins. There are none available, extra ones available. Notice they only cover dimensional styles, layers, line types, and text styles. I looked on the internet. I could not find any more available. I wish they had one for multi-line, but they don't. I've never figured out what that exclamation point right there means, and I wish somebody that's on this call could send me an email and tell me what it is. Nobody can tell me. You can go over to Notes and make notes for this check. Let me just say this is a final check. Now when I go to check the drawings, it asks me if I want to save this, which I do. So I'm going to put it in my folder, and I'm going to call it Final Check Status. It's a CHX file. And now it processes all the drawings and gives you this pop-up. So what we're looking at is all the drawings, an overview. I can look at the plugins, which doesn't tell me more than the plugins that were assigned. We can also look at the standards that were hooked into it Now, this is a great way to interpolate all the styles that are set in your drawings, but it's really not helpful in this report. We won't go there. So let me go down here and pick on a lot of information in this. Go to the problem. Here are all the problems that you need to have fixed in those drawings. It tells you a listing. Types, layers, line types, dimensions, whatever they are, it shows them all. Again, it's not changing anything. It's just showing a report. These are per drawing. I can uncheck drawings if I need to just look at one of them. Also ignored problems. I ignored that problem a while ago, and there it is. Now, I'll close this. You can also export this to an HTML file if you'd like to. That would be the same as my report I just had. Just simply hit save and you've got it. Again, remember, this is not changing anything. It's just a report. Well, let's move on to Layer Translator. The Layer Translator only deals with layers. It can do some very fancy things. Let me open up a drawing here. I'll go back to number 4 here. This drawing has been previously run through the standard checker. Before I run the Layer Translator, I normally do that. Let me go to Layer Translator. This is all the layers in the drawing. Please note some of them have a little broom beside them, and you probably have already guessed you can purge those layers if you want to. One thing to be cautious of, if you hit that, it doesn't get just the one I have highlighted, it gets them all. So be very careful. You may need those layers later. The next thing is to load what you want to translate to. So I'm going to pick load and pick on my drawing standards and say OK. Now if I hit map same, it's going to map all the ones that are the same name. And you see them down here in the list and all their properties. Now notice 2 of them did not have layer assigned in my standards. I have two or three options here. One, I can just get rid of them because they need to be purged. 2, I can go over here at New and add a layer if I want to, HVAC to preserve it. I can set up my properties of that layer, whatever I want to do. This is adding it to the standards for this particular run. Now that it's there, if I pick that and pick this one, I can map that individually, get rid of that one. And you can see it falls down here as being mapped. Now, if I don't do this one, you'll see it in the report in a few minutes. I'm going to skip that one for right now. Now, the next thing you need to do is down here, you can notice you can actually edit these layers and change what you did. Or you can actually remove it and put it back in the list, like that. Let me put it back. You can remove it if you want to. You can also save it. If you save this, you can put it as a drawing or a DWS file. I'm going to replace one called Layer Translate, just replace it. And what that does is save all my configuration. You'll see that in a second. Now I'm going to go ahead and hit Translate. Oh, by the way, let's look at settings. Now we already talked about the block one. That will go inside this block over here and get all the layers inside, even nested blocks. But notice some of the others. Force object by layer. You don't know how wonderful that will be, because over here, this particular block, somebody changed this layer, the entities to purple, or I think they call that, I don't know what the name they give it, but it was supposed to be white, but it did it manually. So it's going to change it back to layer. They changed the color from by layer to a color. Same thing with line type and transparency. You can write a transaction log. The other one's kind of, I don't find it really useful, but you click this and you say, okay, what happens is this. Everything disappears until you highlight it. For example, let me alphabetize these, and if I click on object, the object layer comes up. All the entities on the object layer, hidden layer, and things like that. I don't find it really useful, but it's up to you. I'm going to take that back off. So now let me go ahead and run the translate. So it translated everything and wrote a transitional log. Let me go to that log and bring it up and show you. It did everything and skipped the one I did not translate. Remember the windows? So all were translated. That was the log. Now let me close the drawing and do it again. And this time I'm going to load not the DWS file used before, but the one I saved out. Watch what happens when I do this. Once you have saved it out from the layer translator routine, it automatically does the mapping for you. Watch carefully. See, it's automatically mapped. Everything's been mapped for me except that one Windows. Let me go ahead and load another one. I'm going to load this alternate, and you'll see it has a Windows file which I can then map. So if I had loaded that one at the same time, it would have brought it over automatically when I say map same. It all depends on the sequence you use. Now if I go to translate this time, it asks me, do I want to translate or translate and save them? The reason it's giving me this dialog is because last time I used the save button down here and wrote it out automatically, so it skipped this step. But this time I don't want to save, I just want to translate, and it's all done. Now one thing I need to bring to your attention. It doesn't matter the state whatsoever that you have. Even if it's locked, it'll still translate it. That is probably something I wish it would not do it when it was locked, but it does not respect these settings at all. Let me prove that by going in and closing the drawing one more time and reopening it. I'm going to go in here and lock the layer, the object layer, which is most of my drawing. I'm going to go ahead and run the translator, load up my layer translation. I'll load both on this time just to show you I'll pick it up. Map same, everything is mapped across, and go ahead and translate. You see the layer changed no matter what, even since it was locked. So remember that when you're doing this, it will not respect a locked layer or frozen or turned off, either one. I think I've covered it completely. Remember that the most important thing is to set up your template and then add to it as you go along, according to your needs. Thank you very much for attending.